Ah, it feels so bad. So today should be a pretty interesting day because for the first time ever, I will be cutting a motherboard up with a Dremel. It's much different than what I usually do when I work on a motherboard, where I will have to save the board or try to bring it back to life or any of that. We're just gonna try to keep this one alive while we shrink it down to about a third of its size while still retaining all of its functionality so it can post. We're gonna be eliminating some things, obviously, like Wi-Fi, the ability to read discs, even Bluetooth, which can be added back in, I believe, which we'll find out as we go through this tutorial a bit more. But the process has always been really fascinating to me, and this isn't new, of course. To create portable systems, people have been figuring out exactly how much the system needs, bare minimum, to post, and then they work up from there. So we're gonna do that here. I'm gonna go ahead and do some preparations. I have to make some markings, and while I do that, we'll just have a word from this video sponsor.
Today's video is sponsored by Dodo Peak for the Nintendo Switch. Dodo Peak is a retro-inspired platformer that just released on the Nintendo eShop. This game reminds me of past classics like Qbert, with a modern twist adding in online leaderboards with friends and weekly challenges. The game starts out simple enough, but then quickly progresses to have some engaging puzzles and elements thrown in, making it rewarding when you get that perfect path in the map. The gameplay sessions are great for the Switch on the go, with most levels being completed quickly, with the drive to return trying to beat you or your friends' best time. Dodo Peak is available now on the Switch for $9.99, and with tons of levels to complete, characters to unlock, and collectibles to find, it will keep you busy for quite a while. Thanks again to Dodo Peak for sponsoring today's video.
Okay, that should do it. So, in order to figure out what we need here for this board to post, we need to realize what the Wii exactly needs. It needs certain electrical signals so that it can start up. It needs Wi-Fi, and all of that can be kind of fixed up. Now, in order to keep the CPU and the GPU intact, along with the NAND, flash memory, all of that, RAM, we've pretty much cut out that spot here. You can see it. I took a marker. Now, this is all part of the tutorial that they have posted up on the site, their assembly guide, and it's, for the most part, pretty rough when it comes to the outline. They show you some points, I guess, to kind of dot so you can figure out where you're drawing the lines to, but like my line up here, for example, got a little crooked on me. However, it is better, as they've said, to cut further out rather than too far in, because you may hit something that you need for it to post. For the most part, outside of the Wi-Fi, of course, that we have now patched out, essentially, you've had to do some preparation with software ahead of this in order to tell the system, oh, it doesn't need Wi-Fi. The entire Wii hacking scene and soft modding scene is amazing right now. It really is way better than it used to be back in the day. So after patching out Wi-Fi, loading up a BB Loader, I believe is what it's called, I'm ready to go here, and after doing some preparation with the drawing, I've also broken off some capacitors that are in the way and unnecessary, and that way I can get hopefully a cleaner cut in this area specifically. I do see some spots where it's gonna be kind of difficult to fit the Dremel in on the side, and I may need to kind of judge it slightly from the back side. Now we have, obviously, CPU, GPU here, RAM, all of that is located dead center of this, and we also have some fairly important components that go alongside of it. And on the back, we do have our NAND flash, I believe, that we have to keep intact as well. And the rest of the stuff isn't really necessary for what we're doing, as we are going to be building up our own way to power the system. We, of course, won't need the power port, won't need any type of video out, since we'll be wiring up that ourselves as well. USB ports, Bluetooth, SD card reader, the drive board, none of that is needed. We will need one of these guys from over here, this U10. We need that and move it over here so that the system can complete its power cycle and post. So we're gonna go ahead and start cutting it up now with the Dremel. Have the reinforced cutting wheel here, several of them. I don't think it's gonna break though. The motherboard shouldn't really be able to damage reinforced cutting wheels that easily. I think we'll be okay. And the cuts, there's not like a lot of them. I think we should be fine with this guy. And I'll put it up to a pretty good speed to make sure it slices through it. And I'm gonna take my time going around because I don't wanna slip and I don't wanna accidentally cut too far in. So I'm gonna cut, for the most part, outside of these lines completely, and then we have to sand a little bit in so we can make sure all the layers inside of the board, because there are layers that are stacked up, are not shorting and touching each other. So here we go. So I made one cut here at the top. Again, on the other side of the line that I drew. Not too worried about being too far out as I'll sand further in. You can see, obviously, shaving stuff getting thrown all over the place here. But it wasn't too bad. The wheel seems pretty good. Sliced right through it. Again, just going to take my time going around this side now and just make several cuts. I should have some sharp edges here that I will also sand down, but just looking to stay on the outside as best as I can and hopefully cutting this guy out all right. Well, it didn't go too badly for the most part. I cut, like I said, kind of further on the outside of the marks that I made, and I think we're good. I don't really see it going too far in or anything, anywhere around it. And it looks pretty raw right now, but we are going to work to sand this down all the way around the edges so none of the layers are touching on the board. And you can see it's pretty dirty right now as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and blow this out with some compressed air and then also scrub it pretty well with some alcohol. And then we'll come back and we'll do some sanding. So it is all cleaned up now, and I'm gonna take some standard 3M sandpaper. I have all different types of grits, 300, 400, and then up to, I think, 1,000. I just wanna move around here so we can try to make this nice and shiny all the way around the edges. It'll, one, make it so it's not all like all rough on the sides, and two, it'll make it so that the layers are not touching, which would, of course, give us a chance of a short when we try to power it. That's something we don't want. So I'm just gonna go around and just scrub it up with sandpaper, kind of at an angle is what they were saying. So I've been sanding for a while and I think we are good. It's very smooth around the outside. I have the edges kind of rounded off and it has like this gold kind of like reflection, sort of like this shininess around it. So I think we're in good shape for that. Again, I haven't done this before, so I don't know how much sanding is required, but I did sand for a while. So now we're gonna get to the point where I think we can test this. So now that we've cut the motherboard itself out, we still need to relocate a component from the other side of the board so that the small board that we've made with all of the essentials for the Wii, for what we're doing, can complete post. It does need this one right here from U9 or U10. I believe they're the same chip, but we'll pull it from U10, and this shouldn't be too bad for the most part. I do have a hot air machine that I'll use, but you can also use a soldering iron. As long as you kind of heat up all of the legs with a nice blob of solder, it should pick up. There's not a lot of points you have to really worry about on it. Now to relocate, we do have to remove all of this here, and we'll have to run one wire around to the back of the board from the leg from that U10 component. Okay, so the trim is technically done at this point. Let me explain to you what I had to do here. So I didn't have really, really small wire, which I may go back and replace this with smaller wire. They have like really small like magnet wire. It's like tiny, but this was the smallest wire I have. I went from here, which was our U10 replacement, of course, so this can post, went down through here, and on the back, they have a very small via that they want this to be connected to. right in here. And in order to solder to it, you have to scratch a little bit of the coating away so you can find a spot for it to connect to. And after testing, there is continuity there. So it at least seems right now that it is connected. But like I said, I may go back and change this out for a smaller one because it did look cleaner in the images they were showing. So now we can go ahead and put this to the side and start putting the G-Boy together. I at least want to get to the point where I can test this just to make sure it works, because it's still really weird to me that I can Dremel a section of a motherboard out and still have it post. So we'll see about that. Now it looks like the first thing they have us starting with here is the back, where we install the back trigger buttons. Okay, so it was a bit more work to get this back plate on than I thought it would be. Now you have to line up the back buttons, and then we also have a Z button here. But because of the way this is like a 3D printed case, right, the screw holes unfortunately are not set up very well to accept the screws immediately. So even in their instructions, they say press kind of hard and then screw in. So it's a little strange. They do eventually catch, but it's not the easiest thing to do. What I did was, with this board out, I kind of screwed in a few of them to help find like the screw hole. And then when I put this over, the rest of them were guided into place. Also, you definitely want to have a feel for the buttons. They're tactile, but you have to have the tension on these screws, I think, just right around it so that they feel correct. Otherwise, they might get stuck or something. They're very tactile. They're pretty loud. Next thing, it looks like we're gonna be installing the USB port and power port at the top, along with the power button. Now, they have a lot of things 3D printed, like the power button, for example. And so you have all that separated along with the screws and the USB CPD PCB like this. They're all separated into bags, so it's pretty easy to at least find everything. And this one in particular looks like it's just gonna sit in with kind of the ports already set up top, and I guess we're just gonna be screwing that in. All right, so there we go. We have our power and USB. The USB port here is internal, so we can store any of the games or ROMs or anything we want. We would just drop it in here. And we have our USB-C port here, which we can use to, I believe, transfer data as well. And we have our power button. So charging, data transfer, and then storage right here. Next, we're gonna be installing the power hardware, as they say. The RVL PMS is gonna sit right here, it looks like, right above those back button boards. And once again, just 4 screws. These are still kind of those iffy screw posts in the back, so keep that in mind. That's one thing if they're going to continue this kit going forward. They want to work on those screw posts, so it's not such a, you don't have to really push, almost feeling like you're drilling in with these flat M2 screws. It's not great for it. I could see some people slipping with their screwdriver. Some of those took quite a bit of force, so hopefully that's something they work on in the future. So I'm installing these clips for the batteries at the bottom here. The batteries are non-removable. They're just gonna sit inside. They'll be charged through USB and all of that, which is great. What's funny is we're putting these different clips in the bottom, and the bottom 2 don't quite fit in the casing, so you have to bend them. It still gives you kind of that feeling of what I guess they would have to go through on a smaller scale, obviously, where they're trying to fit like some of the weirdest parts together to make these things. Even some of the parts that they give you don't quite work completely, so you have to do some modification of your own. It's just bending. It's just funny to think about. We are going to now wire up our power hardware, and it looks like add the batteries in, which is always kind of that nervous feeling of wiring everything up, plugging it in to make sure it all works together when we get to that point. But that's what we're going to be doing. So of course we need to go ahead and connect our battery clips down here, which will add some solder and do that. All right, so we went ahead and attached all of our battery clips together here on either side. So with this board, it does tell us we have ground here and then B+ power on this side. So they did red and black. That makes sense. That's usually what you'll see inside of builds that kind of tell you which side's ground and which side's power. So I just went and did the same thing. Black wire running here up to this clip. This clip also runs there to this clip. Same on this side, running to our power board right here. That way we could put our batteries in, and we should be able to charge and of course discharge them when we are playing the thing. So this should be fun. The next part is going to be installing our heatsink and fan. And it does look like our fan's gonna sit right here, but we will have to feed wire underneath of here so it can kind of escape out of the side, just underneath of our USB board at the top. Looks pretty straightforward. Basically, we have to just get it around this one screw that's here in this corner so it can escape right out the side here. Kind of a strange fit there, but it does look like it comes right out the side. There we go. So now all of our wires here. Just 2 for the fan, of course. Runs out, and the fan should sit right in here. It looks like it's kind of molded out for it to sit right next to that board. All right, there we go. You have to really pull these wires out to make sure there's nothing underneath of it. And then the fan actually clips in, so it's in there, just kind of snapped in, which is pretty good to see that. Now we also have to put our heatsink. Then we have a metal plate as well that's going to go between that and the board, so we can cool both that CPU and the GPU at the same time. Okay, so we have the heatsink installed here. Fan is clipped in. We have the wires from the fan tucked down around going between the power and the back button board. It was kind of strange to try to feed those through, so I just unscrewed the power board, kind of lifted it up a little bit, got the cables through, and then just screwed it back down to make it a bit easier. Now, in order to power the fan, they just pulled off of both of these 2 capacitors on the bottom here. The right side would be 3.3 volts, left side is ground, so I just copied what they did. They just blobbed both together, dropped the wires on there, and that should give our fan some power. So now we're gonna be soldering our USB port up here along with the power button down and around to our main power board here. It's gonna take quite a few wires, it looks like, and you want them to be pretty thin. This is unfortunately the thinnest that I have, but it's pretty flexible, so I think I should be able to get away with it. All right, so all of the wiring for power is done. We have wires running all over the place here. I will say what they have on the site here for what I'm following is slightly different with the parts they're using for what I have. They had to solder some of these wires to like the middle here. It does look like the one that I have currently is maybe newer or more refined, but for the most part, the instructions they were giving me was basically match this up here with this. Everything was labeled, so even though the images were a little different, it was pretty easy. It was just solder this point to this point because they both say 5 volt, for example. So I just followed them, did them one at a time, and everything seems like it's together. And now I just have to put the batteries in, and I guess we can test it. All right, so here's one of our 18650 batteries. This is one from Samsung. So we have our negative side here. It's completely flat. And then we have our positive side here. According to their site, their logo is also set up in that way so that on the left side of the logo is positive, the right side is negative. So we should be able to just sit this in here. I don't know if these have any power, though. That's the only thing. They've been sitting for a little bit. So I guess we'll drop it in. We also have plus and minus here kind of set up, and that's how we wired it up anyways. All right, here we go. I will admit I'm a little nervous because I don't really play around with a lot of batteries like this with wires everywhere. So, oh, look at that. The fan's spinning. All right, cool. So 1, that means the battery has power, and 2, according to this, that means everything is wired up correctly. So we have power going to the fan, it's spinning. It says I should be able to press and hold power button down and shut it right off. Look at that. All right, that's good stuff. Good first step there, get all that wired up for the power. Okay, so I did jump ahead a little bit here, mostly because I just want to be able to test the board and then I can go back and cut wires correctly for the sizing and all of that. So I went ahead and just installed the LCD, which was pretty easy. You just have to screw it in with a bracket that they have. Ran wires for the power and the ground down here to our power board. And what's really funny is all of these wires that are just everywhere right now is just for the RGB light at the top. You know what? I don't know if this was as necessary to do it, but it has a bunch of modes. It can change color depending on the level of power left in your batteries and all of that. So I guess it's pretty cool, but you can see this right here, all of this is just for the RGB light all the way over here. But the good news is now I'm on the step where we will take our trimmed Wii board and install it in here. So we're gonna start wiring that up. So I told you before, we do have this copper shim that will allow us to cool both the CPU and the GPU correctly all at the same time. So we're gonna place this after we peel protective layers off. Right on here where our heatsink is, where I peeled that off as well. And it looks like the way it's going to go, it will also pretty much complete like its own little shroud, kind of with the air exiting out. So it does kind of double as that, but the board's just gonna go right on top of this guy. So both of these will make contact, cooling everything. Now, I don't know if I even need that right now just to be able to test it, because what happens when you power this board on without a USB plugged in with any type of program, I think it just says no USB detected or something. But if it comes up to that point, that means this should be working fine, which is great news using that BB loader. So I guess we'll go ahead, we're gonna wire this up and then we'll power it on. it's taken quite some time to get to this part. Mostly I wanted to get to the point where we could test that trimmed Wii board, because that's what I was trying to do today, was get there. However, that is much further in the process. So as you can see here, I just wired a lot of things up. I'm gonna go back and trim these correctly, but I mostly just wanted to get to the phase where we could test the Wii to make sure it works after cutting it up with a Dremel, making it this small. So we have our board behind it. So we have our LCD, our board, and then we wired everything up. We have power. Everything's running off of this one battery. I have another one here that I would install when we're all done. So we'll have 2 of those. It's not plugged in or anything. So we can go ahead and test it after wiring everything up. All of these wires here, like I said, are from the RGB light. It's like a ton. And then we also had to wire up USB, which I will have to get that the really small magnetic wire, because it was a pain to get the USB running correctly, since it's such a small point. It's like a little via I had to scratch off to try to even get something to stick to it. But I did. The board is just kind of floating here. I don't have it down on the heatsink, mostly because it shouldn't be able to overheat, since I'm not gonna have it on long enough or even really do anything right now. I didn't install any of the controls yet. Like I said, we just wanna power this guy on. So all the power in, all these cables everywhere. We have our screen. What we should see if this works, so I don't have USB plugged in or anything right now. We should see it come up with some text. It should say like failed to initialize, load preloader, all of that. That's what it would do before when I tested it without that. So here we go. Light, got the fan. It should get some more text. Look at that. Failed to, yep, press A to boot to preloader. Wow. That Wii board is actually posting. That is some wild stuff, isn't it? Now the fan is spinning right now. I don't know if the Wii chips are getting warm, not really. But everything running off of this one battery now. Like I said, the other battery will go in. This is, gotta say, I'm a bit surprised. I mean, look, it should work, obviously, if you do everything right, but it's still weird to cut a motherboard to 1/3 of its size, run some wires to bypass some post checks, and it just come on. There's still a lot I need to do, okay? And this is only part 2. So there's still some things that have to go on when it comes to wire management, obviously, to get this all to fit together. I have to install the audio, but this is some cool stuff. Well, I have stuff everywhere. I went through quite a few of the packets. I installed a lot of stuff, screwed a lot of things together here, wires all over the place. But a lot of progress made today in this video. This part 2, I guess. In the next one, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna clean all this up before then. We'll go ahead and finish putting it together, and then we will play the portable Wii, which will basically be, for me anyway, a portable GameCube. That's really the biggest thing that I wanted here, was that. So I will have to get the Bluetooth and reinstall that as well. That is part of the steps, but I'm pretty happy. I think this is turning out really cool, and you know what? I'm mildly shocked that nothing has gone horribly wrong yet. Their instructions, at least, are pretty good. They're pretty self-explanatory. Everything's marked well here. And the only thing I think I'm gonna run into is being able to route the wires myself so that everything fits together perfectly. But hey, so far so good. Let me know what you guys think about this so far, what we've gone through here to make this happen. A lot of stuff here, but it'll be very satisfying when it goes together. The last screw goes in, we flip it over, and then we turn on Mario Sunshine. That's right. Thanks guys for watching. Make sure you hit the like button on the way out if you enjoyed it. Dislike it if not, and I'll see you next time.